Can there be fair and safe elections in Kenya? The torture and murder of election chief Chris Msando is casting a shadow over next week's elections. Kenyans are demanding justice, and so is the international community. And with the killing of 1,300 Kenyans in fighting following the disputed result 4 years ago, could there be a repeat? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Richelle Carey. Severely tortured and strangled to death. That's the conclusion of the autopsy on Chris Msando. The head of technology for Kenya's Electoral Board is at the center of a murder investigation. It is raising questions about the legitimacy of the general and presidential election on Tuesday. So let's take a closer look at the candidates and what's at stake. The presidential race is a rematch of 4 years ago between the winner, then President Uhuru Kenyatta, and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. Kenyatta is the son of Kenya's first president. Odinga is the second son of Kenya's first vice president. Almost 20 million Kenyans are registered to vote next week. As well as choosing a president, voters will pick 67 senators, 47 county governors, and 349 MPs. Most are directly elected, but some are allocated by proportional representation, with some seats reserved for women, young people, and the disabled. Odinga contested the presidential election results in both 2007 and 4 years ago. That result led to the killing of at least 1,300 Kenyans. 600,000 were displaced by the post-election bloodshed. Kenyans remain deeply divided at this year's election as it approaches. Let's bring in the guests now. All of them are joining us from Nairobi today. Allan, Namu, an investigative reporter at Africa Uncensored, an independent online news outlet. Raphael, Tuju, the Secretary General of the incumbent president's Jubilee Party, and Kenneth Okoth, a member of Parliament with presidential candidate Raila Odinga's ODM party. Thank you to all of you for joining me for the program. So, the kidnapping, torture, and murder of the senior-most election official. How are your constituents reacting to that? Ken, I want to start with you.
I think it's really rather shocking, and we hope that this high-profile murder of Chris Msando, as well as other murders that have happened recently, last year we had the murder of lawyers Willie Kimani, will be investigated and quickly responded to so we get justice. Remember, Chris Msando had a very sensitive job in terms of this technology at the IEBC, and the British government and the US government have offered assistance by the FBI and the Scotland Yard to investigate and bring to book the culprits. And I hope the government of Kenya will accept that assistance to make sure that the investigations are thorough and credible so that people don't cast aspersions as to who was involved in his death. But it's very worrying, and I hope that we will still have credible elections, even though somebody who was very important for the technology aspect of these elections has been eliminated.
And we're going to talk about a lot of those issues that you just brought up, Ken. But Raphael, I want to put the same question to you. How are members of your party, how are your constituents reacting to this?
Well, we all expressed shock. I think it was very unfortunate that this has happened. And when things like this happen just shortly before an election, it creates all kinds of speculation as to what could be the reason for it. We are exercising a lot of caution not to jump to conclusions and to give the investigative authorities the opportunities to investigate this to the bottom of it. And they've been giving some updates as to what may have happened in the morning hours of that day when he disappeared. He had come from a nightclub at about 2:30 a.m. in the morning. We think it's very, very unfortunate that a young person of this capability can just lose his life like that. Both sides of the divide have expressed their dismay at this happening.
Allan, obviously it's been, with the history of elections in Kenya, it's been extremely tense leading up to this. Having said that, was there any indication that something like this could happen?
No, definitely. This was like the black swan event of this election. Much as there's been tension regarding the closeness of the race, some of that was mitigated because of the fact of devolution, because governors are spending more time campaigning. There's less focus on the national race. But this definitely was something that came out of the blue. It's that Black Swan event that ramps up the tension and the pressure on the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission to get things right this time around. And it makes things even more sensitive for the country going forward into these last few days before the election.
Absolutely. Are you hearing from anyone, John Allan, you're reporting, any citizens that are actually fearful now going to the polls?
Well, yes, definitely. There are a number of places that have experienced, I wouldn't say an exodus, but there has been movement of people, especially in low-income areas. Ken can tell you more from his constituency. We've witnessed a few people moving out of areas that are dominated by certain tribes and trying to get into areas that have their own tribes, sort of to act as a buffer or protection against any outcome in terms of violence. There certainly is tension in some of the areas where there are closer races in the coast, in Kisumu. There definitely is some movement from informal areas specifically, but also with a lot of companies and a lot of people who work in formal employment. A lot of their companies are advising them to stock up on food, on water, on batteries, just in case things go badly. And I think that's telling enough of how tense things are in the country with regard to where people think this election could go, in spite of proof that there could be peace, or rather there would be peace, given, like I said, how devolved the races are and how much importance has been taken away from the national race.
Ken, as someone who is a member of the legislature, are you fearful for your life?
I take good measures for my own security and my movements, but so I wouldn't say I'm fearful. I am just very cautious, which is something I have to think about every day, because security is an issue that you must think about in public life in Kenya. But to the question you asked about people moving through different places, that is an indictment of the government of the day. The Jubilee government should provide a level of confidence in all Kenyans that their security is guaranteed as per their constitution, their right to live and work and vote anywhere in the country. But it is evidence that Kenyans don't feel the reassurance and the competence of the government to protect them where they are, and that's why people are moving. And it's not just in the informal settlements that John Allan has mentioned, but it's also happening in places like Naivasha, which was one of the scenes of the worst violence in 2007, 2008. It's happening in places like Eldoret, where people of different ethnic groups are leaving their homes and moving. And so it is really an indictment of the process and the commitment to implement the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission report. We had a TJRC report which this government has failed to implement, which my government, when we get in power, we will work hard to implement to fix the historical injustices, but also, just general regular security. The pattern of extrajudicial killings is very high, and John Allan has done some work on that.
Okay, Ken, I want to give Raphael a chance to respond because of the things that you've said about his party. Raphael, what of that? What has been done to make Kenyans feel safe and have any trust in this electoral process?
I think there's a backdrop to all this. I'm not going to try and score some debating points in this particular conversation. I think I would like to enlighten the rest of the world as to the challenges that we face in this country. We had post-election violence in 2007. At that time, the former Prime Minister, who is also a candidate in these elections, was a candidate in the elections in 2013, and he was a candidate in the elections in 1997. So this is his fourth attempt. He's kept on saying all the time that he's really never lost elections, he's always been rigged. And he has kept on saying that he suspects these elections are going to be rigged. He had organized, together with his party, all kinds of street protests last year to get rid of the Electoral Commission which was in place. And he has pronounced several times that he cannot lose these elections. He will only lose if he's rigged out. He has also said
so,
that if this time is rigged out,
saying that he's undermining.
And he has not told people what he'll do. So they have created the element, yes, they have created the atmosphere of fear that is making a lot of people apprehensive and want to move out.
John Allan, let me ask you, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, of which Chris Msando was part of that, clearly it seems that they have a very difficult job. But having said that, there has been criticism about their preparations for these elections, saying that that some of the same issues that were present in last election were present here. What has your reporting told you about what the commission had been doing to get a handle on things?
Well, the commission, to be fair, it's not completely all they're doing. I think it's also a political situation that fomented some of the delays that they experienced. As Raphael mentioned, the street protests and the getting out of the former commission delayed some of the deadlines and some of the timelines that they had in terms of procurement of equipment, training and testing of this new equipment. Also, the law that was agreed upon by both sides has made it a fairly difficult affair to be able to manage. The independent and electoral management system is one that by law has to be electronic, and certain processes of it are written into the law, meaning that the IEBC has a very strict line to walk. Having said that, it looks like there's been a late rally by the IEBC with regard to procurement of equipment and with regard to testing of that equipment. Now, and perhaps this is why Chris Msando was important, because that gave people a level of confidence that things were starting to work. But then again, you look at the procurement of ballot papers, something that had been controversial since November last year, especially ballot papers for the presidential election, and that plays into some of the political narratives of the opposition. So it's sort of like a 2 steps forward, 2 steps back issue with the IEBC. And unfortunately, the death of Msando has just hurt all of the momentum that they had built towards going into a free, fair and credible election, even though it's highly unlikely that he'd be the only person who knows or manages the information and that system as he would have.
I do actually want to ask you a little bit more about that, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say that obviously the people most directly affected by the death of Chris Msando is his family, obviously, but because of the role he had, that's why it's important to discuss the impact on the country at large. Leading up to this, had there been a level of enthusiasm, of interaction, of engagement by citizens really wanting to make this work, this process work, John Allan?
I'd say engagement from the point of view of trepidation. People have been very suspicious of the IEBC's intentions, the IEBC's motives. Like a great example is the additional ballots that were brought into the country, and IEBC had said that it had about 1% for the presidential race, in addition to the ballots that were going to be used during the race. Immediately there was pushback from the public, especially online, in calculating just how much 1% means, and there was found to have been a gap of about 900,000 votes. So there has been engagement, there has been pushback, I'd say more so than open and positive engagement, because of what happened in 2013. I mean, you know, there's a saying, if you're chased by a buffalo, a black cow is scary enough. And so that's how the public, from my point of view, has been engaging with the IEBC.
Let's talk. Let's kind of drill down on some of the issues now, and obviously the murder of Chris Msando and the threat of violence. That is very much part of the election, but the issues are also part of the election. Ken, I want to go to you. What are the issues that you think are the most important that perhaps are not getting enough attention?
I think you'd want to quote someone like Reagan, who basically in the 1980s put it in his election. Are we better off today than we were 4.5 years ago? The average Kenyan will tell you that they are not better off. The cost of living has gone up 40%. The daily subsistence things like maize flour have been hard to get by cartels that are, protected by government agencies. Extrajudicial killings are real in this country, from places like Garissa to Mombasa to the slums of Nairobi. So there's a lot of human rights issues. But when you talk about implementation of the devolution agenda, how much money is allocated to the county governments? Again, we have a fundamental difference there. The Jubilee side thinks 15 or 20% is enough. We are proposing to give up to 40% of annual revenues to the county governments to implement the devolved functions that have been given to them. on issues of national unity and reconciliation and inclusion. Again, the Jubilee government has failed, and I think the country is still polarized. That's why people are running away. They have said they'll not implement the TJRC reports, and we have said we will implement it. So a lot of young people are feeling left out with the high unemployment overall.
Okay.
The economy is growing on the big figures, and on the day-to-day issues, young people are not getting jobs,
right,
and
Ken,
are being left behind. So some people are feeling the benefit, but some are feeling left out.
Okay, Ken, and obviously I gave a member of parliament an open-ended question, and you did the most with your time, as you absolutely should. So I'm going to give Raphael a chance to respond to some of the issues that you brought up. Raphael?
Well, when you want to talk about cost of living and price of maize meal and the rest of it, you can go on and on about that all over Africa, all over the world. Everybody always complains about the cost of living, and politicians try to score debating points on this. I'm not going to go there. I think Kenya
but are those not real issues, Raphael?
In some respects, country... Yeah, I'll want to tell you what the real issue is if you give me a minute.
Yes, sir.
The real issue in this part of the world, anytime an African state has failed in Africa, it is invariably because of ethnic tensions and clan tensions. You can talk about Somalia, you can talk about South Sudan, you can talk about DRC Congo. The common thread that is evident in every failed African state is that. Now, as Jubilee Party and this president, the one action that they are committed to is to ensure that we make this country viable by bringing the Kenyans together. What our opponents have done, which is the easy thing to do, is to be able to whip up nationalistic emotions of various communities, is essentially a concoction of tribal chiefs from different parts of the country. They don't even get along. I mean, if you're talking about corruption, as my...
Okay, we're having a bit of a technical issue right now with Raphael, so while we sort that out, I'm going to go to John Allan on that. John Allan, is that, obviously the ethnic tensions are real, but is that an oversimplification of the complex issues that Kenya is facing?
An extreme oversimplification. You see, tribalism is always the funnel that all of our issues are expressed through, because people, especially during a hyper-political period, are asked to experience them through that tribal lens. But the truth of the matter is corruption is an issue. Hunger is a real issue. Impunity is an issue. All of these things are things that the Jubilee government has tried to deal with to some level, to some measures, but to a large extent, especially with regard to impunity, with regard to solving crimes, extrajudicial killings. That's been a very big issue for this government. Whether it makes it to the front of a voter's mind is really something that is difficult to decide. And that's because propaganda has become such a big part of this election. So all sorts of mudslinging has become such a great part of this, aided by the internet, that a regular voter, is very hard-pressed to decide what the real, true issues are, even though they've been experiencing from some time, especially over these 4 years. So to say that it's just ethnic tensions that are being whipped up, no, that's not true. But the history of the country is that all of our issues, a lot of our issues, are always expressed through that point of view, through two specific lenses. With the government of the day, it will be that person, that candidate is dangerous, and therefore we should not let him anywhere near the presidency. To the people in the opposition is that we've been marginalized. We, being the regular Kenyan on the street, has been marginalized, and therefore it is our turn to be able to take a share
so
of
John
this,
Allan, let me ask you then, if
this cake.
If it's the same narrative every election, how do you get particularly young people, and I know you've done reporting on this, how do you get young people to feel like it's not just more of the same over and over?
By engaging with their issues, by telling them and talking to them about real structural ways that you can solve the problem, for one, of unemployment, which is by far the biggest issue that young people across the country are complaining about. But because both Jubilee and NASA are reading from the same playbook, then the very broad strokes that are being painted and very hopeful pictures of the future that are being painted without real specifics, without real engagement. And it's become more of a caricature of engagement rather than real positive engagement with the youth, with the president going on Facebook and answering questions, thinking that a savvy sort of approach to reaching out to where the youth are is really the be-all and end-all to that solution. And on the other hand, with Raila Odinga trying and turning on a more youthful side of himself, dancing on stages and engaging with young people, it's really a caricature of what exactly they should be doing, rather than engaging directly and constructively, including young people in their administration, in their political leadership, that they're not doing that.
So,
Ken might be a senior politician within the NASA coalition, but he's in a far lower rank than he ought to be if they were being serious about engaging with the youth.
Let me ask Ken about that. Let me ask Ken about that. Ken, is there a pipeline, if you will, to get new, energized leadership into politics in Kenya, particularly in your party?
I think, first of all, leadership is not about age. It's about the ideas and the responses to the needs of the people at that time. If you look across Africa, in Nigeria, they elected a leader who had tried and run before. So there's nothing wrong with Raila Odinga having run before. The question is, are his ideas and policies right for the situation facing our country now? And we should not deny him the chance to run. We should listen to his ideas instead of denying him the chance. Specifically, let me give you two examples of issues that we've been focusing on in our campaign now. We've said that Jubilee is focused on creating a country of 40 billionaires and 40 million poor people. We are left behind. You had Raphael's response was that these issues are common all across Africa. That insensitivity and out of touch with people who are sleeping hungry every day in my constituency is why Jubilee is losing the support. We need to focus on policies such as the question of young single mothers in our country. It is a public health issue. It's a national economic crisis waiting to happen when so many women are struggling and raising children in the trap and downward cycle of poverty. We have proposed to make that as a national critical issue to see what interventions can we give to young single mothers in this country to make sure they're getting back on the career path. And I'm just giving you an example.
No, I understand, but Ken, just to be fair, Raphael has not had as much of a platform for this show just because of a few technical issues. So I think it's more than time to let him get in on this discussion. So Raphael, actually, I'm going to give you the last word. What do you think is at stake for Kenyans and for Kenya in this election?
Well, now you can see they can even fix the technical problems for me, so I cannot be heard. But that's the light touch. We do have a real problem in this country in terms of how to bring the country together, and that's not unique to Kenya. I think is a problem right across Africa. So the thing that we consider most important is to ensure that we have unity of the country, peace in the country, because it doesn't matter what programs you have, if you're not able to ensure that there's peace, you'll build your roads, but then people will blow up the bridges, and then there'll be nowhere to go. I didn't hear the rest of the conversation that my colleagues in the other studios have said, so I don't know really how to respond, but I'm able to just confirm to you that we are committed to ensuring that we have a free and fair elections. This president has a record of having been the first presidential candidate to concede defeat in 2002. No other presidential candidate has ever conceded defeat. And we are hoping that if he wins this time, his opponents will concede defeat. They will concede. And on his part, he has said it over and over again. President Uhuru has said it over and over again that he's ready to hand over power to whoever is elected as president of this country. Our opponents are not doing that. Okay. They're saying they will not accept it unless they win. And that is where the problem is.
Raphael, I first of all just want to apologize for the technical difficulties and thank you for your patience as such. You were at a little bit of a disadvantage because we lost you for a little bit. So thank you for joining us and thank you for your time. And thank you to John Allan Namu, to Raphael Tuju and Ken Okoth Thank you all very much. I'm sure we'll be touching base again before the election. And thank you for watching as well. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com, for further discussion. Go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For me, Richelle, Carey, and the entire team, bye for now.